cold steel of a blade pressed against my throat, and the smell of fresh blood filled the air. My pack was dying. The screams of my friends and family echoed through the trees of the North Valley, cut short by the wet thud of falling bodies. "Don't move, little wolf," a voice hissed in my ear. I didn't listen. I slammed my elbow into the guard's ribs, felt the bone snap, and spun around. I didn't have time to shift. I grabbed his own dagger and buried it in his chest. He gasped, his eyes rolling back as he slumped into the dirt. If you're new here, welcome to my YouTube channel, and to my returnee subscribers, thanks so much for your support. Title says The Alpha's Stolen Mate. Let's dive in. I ran. My lungs burned. Every step I took was over a body I recognized. This wasn't a war, it was a massacre. The Black Moon Pack had arrived like a shadow in the night, silent and deadly. Their Alpha Cade was a monster people only whispered about in nightmares. They said he didn't just kill, he erased entire lineages. "Elara! Run!" my mother's voice screamed. I turned toward the Alpha's house. It was engulfed in flames. My mother was on her knees, her silver hair matted with blood. Standing over her was a massive wolf, his fur as black as coal, his eyes a glowing, terrifying gold. Alpha Cade. He shifted in a blur of bone and muscle, standing tall and naked amidst the fire, draped only in the shadows of the smoke. He didn't look like a man, he looked like a god of death. "Stop!" I screamed, lunging forward. Before I could reach her, a hand grabbed my hair and yanked me backwards so hard I hit the ground. I looked up, expecting a Black Moon soldier. Instead, I saw my father. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't bleeding. He was holding a white cloth in his hand, the symbol of surrender. "Father, what are you doing?" "Help her," I gasped, clawing at his hand. He didn't look at my mother. He didn't look at the dying pack. He looked at Alpha Cade. "I have what you want, Alpha," my father shouted, his voice trembling but desperate. "The girl. The one with the pure bloodline. Take her and leave me the lands." The world stopped. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest while it was still beating. My own father was selling me. He was trading his daughter for a piece of dirt and his own pathetic life. Alpha Cade walked toward us. Every step he took made the ground vibrate. The fire from the house reflected in his golden eyes. He looked down at me like I was a piece of meat. "This is the one?" Cade's voice was a deep, low growl that vibrated in my very bones. It was a dark, seductive sound that made my skin crawl and my heart race for all the wrong reasons. "Yes. Elara. She is untouched. She is strong. She will give you many heirs," my father pleaded, pushing me toward the monster. I scrambled to my feet, my face hot with tears and rage. I swung my fist at my father's face, hitting him square in the jaw. He fell back, shocked. "I am not a trade," I roared. I turned to Cade, my claws extending. "Kill me. Kill me like you killed the others. I will never go with you." Cade didn't flinch. In a move so fast I couldn't even see it, he lunged. His hand wrapped around my throat, lifting me off the ground. My feet dangled, kicking uselessly against his iron-hard thighs. "You have spirit," Cade whispered, his face inches from mine. I could smell the scent of rain, cedar, and blood on him. It was intoxicating and hateful. But you are mine now. Your father is a coward, but he is a coward with a prize. He looked over at my father, who was smiling, thinking he had won. You want the lands? Cade asked. Yes, Alpha. Thank you, Alpha, my father bowed. Cade's grip on my throat tightened just enough to make me gasp. With his free hand, he signaled to his beta standing nearby. Kill him. I don't do business with traitors who sell their own blood. My father's eyes widened. No! Wait. A blade flashed. My father's head hit the grass before his body even went limp. I wanted to scream, but I had no air. I felt a sick sense of justice, mixed with a crushing, agonizing pain. I was truly alone. Cade tossed me over his shoulder like a sack of grain. Put me down. I'll kill you. I'll tear your throat out while you sleep. I screamed, pounding my fists against his back. It was like hitting a brick wall. You can try, little wolf, Cade said, his hand sliding down to grip my thigh firmly. But tonight, you learn your place. You are no longer a Luna of the North. You are a slave to the Black Moon. He began walking away from the burning ruins of my life. Behind us, the screams were fading into a haunting silence. He tossed me into the back of a black SUV, slamming the door and locking it. I scrambled to the window, watching my home disappear in the smoke. The pain in my chest was so sharp I couldn't breathe. Everything was gone. My mother, my friends, my future. The door on the other side opened, and Cade climbed in. The space felt tiny with him inside. He smelled like the man who had just destroyed my world, yet my inner wolf was pacing, whining, reacting to his presence in a way that made me want to vomit. Don't look at me, I spat, huddling against the door. Cade reached out, his long fingers grabbing my chin and forcing me to look at him. You will look at me whenever I am in the room. You will learn to crave my gaze, Elara. I will learn to crave your death, I countered, baring my teeth. He laughed. It was a dark, hungry sound. We will see. The journey to the Black Moon territory is long. By the time we arrive, you'll realize that I am the only thing keeping you alive. Suddenly, the SUV jolted. An explosion rocked the road ahead. Ambush, the driver yelled. Bullets began to pepper the side of the vehicle. Cade didn't even blink. He shoved me down onto the floor of the car, pinning me with his heavy body. Stay down, he commanded. He didn't wait. He kicked the door open while the car was still moving and shifted midair. A massive black wolf leaped into the darkness, followed by the sounds of bones snapping and men screaming in agony. I stayed on the floor, shaking. This was my chance. The door was open. The guards were distracted by the ambush. I could run. I could disappear into the woods and never look back. I crawled toward the open door, the wind whipping my hair. I looked out and saw the carnage. Cade, the wolf, was a blur of fur and teeth, ripping through attackers. He was protecting the car. He was protecting me. I didn't care. I leaped from the moving car, hitting the pavement and rolling into the ditch. I ignored the sting of the scrapes on my arms and legs. I scrambled into the thick brush, running as fast as my human legs would carry me. Run. 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 The woods were dark, but I knew them. If I could just reach the river, I could mask my scent. I heard a howl behind me. It wasn't a normal howl. It was a roar of pure, unadulterated fury. It was Cade. He knew I was gone. The sound was getting closer. He wasn't running, he was hunting. I pushed harder, my heart thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. The river was just ahead. I could hear the rushing water. I'm going to make it. I reached the bank and prepared to jump, but a shadow blocked the moonlight. Cade was standing on a rock above me, his human form restored, looking down at me with a terrifying smirk. He wasn't even out of breath. He looked like he was enjoying this. Did you really think you could run from me, Elara? He jumped down, landing silently in front of me. He walked closer, and I backed up until my heels were over the edge of the water. I told you, he whispered, reaching out to stroke my cheek with a thumb that felt like fire. You belong to me. And I don't like it when people touch my things. Or when my things try to break. He grabbed my waist and pulled me flush against him. The heat radiating from his body was intense. For a second, our eyes locked, and I felt a spark of something so powerful it made my knees weak. Betrayal. Pain. Desire. I spat in his face. His jaw tightened. His eyes went dark, the gold turning to a deep, burnt orange. Fine, he growled. We'll do this the hard way. He threw me over his shoulder again, but this time, he didn't put me in the car. He shifted into the great black wolf and gripped my shirt in his teeth, tossing me onto his back. He took off at a terrifying speed, leaping over logs and rocks, carrying me deeper into the heart of the enemy territory. I gripped his fur, tears streaming down my face. I was being taken to the lion's den, and the worst part was, my body was starting to recognize the monster as its mate. I hated him. I hated my father. I hated the bond. And as the gates of the Black Moon Fortress appeared in the distance, I knew the nightmare was only just beginning. The heavy iron gates of the Black Moon Fortress slammed shut behind us with a sound like a guillotine. Cade didn't let me down gently. He shifted back into his human form mid-stride, and I tumbled off his back, hitting the cold stone floor of the courtyard. I scrambled to my feet, but two guards immediately grabbed my arms, their fingers digging into my bruises. Move, little prize, one hissed, dragging me toward the great hall. Let go of me! I screamed, kicking out. I landed a solid blow to his shin, hearing a satisfying crack, but a third guard slammed the butt of his rifle into my stomach. The air left my lungs in a painful wheeze. I doubled over, coughing, but they didn't stop. They dragged me through the massive oak doors of the hall. The room was packed. It smelled like roasted meat, expensive whiskey, and the sweat of hundreds of predatory wolves. These were the high-ranking members of the Black Moon Pack, and they were all staring at me. Look at her, a woman sneered from a table near the front. The great Luna of the North, covered in dirt and blood. She looks like a stray dog. Laughter erupted around the room. I looked up and saw Cade. He was sitting on a throne made of dark wood and bone at the end of the long hall. He had a glass of dark liquid in his hand, watching me with those cold, golden eyes. Tonight is a celebration. Cade's voice boomed over the noise, silenced the room instantly. We have erased the North Valley. We have taken their lands. And now, we dispose of their legacy. He gestured to me. The guards forced me onto a wooden platform in the center of the hall. It was a stage. An auction block. She is the daughter of a traitor and the last of her line, Cade continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. Who wants the honor of breaking her? Who wants to own the girl who thought she would one day rule us? The room went wild. Men stood up, shouting out prices, not in money, but in favors, in gold, in territory. It was sickening. They were bidding on me like I was a piece of furniture. 50 bars of gold, a scarred wolf shouted from the back. I'll make her my house slave. 200 head of cattle and a border territory, another roared. I want to see her cry. I looked at Cade, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. He was just sitting there, watching the chaos he had created. He looked bored. He looked like he enjoyed my humiliation. Suddenly, a woman stepped forward. She was beautiful in a sharp, lethal way, wearing a dress that looked like it was made of liquid silver. This was Sienna. She walked up to the platform and grabbed my hair, forcing my head back so she could inspect my face. She's pathetic, Cade, Sienna called out, her voice dripping with venom. Why sell her to these dogs? Let me have her. I'll peel that pretty skin off her face and use it for a rug. Sienna backhanded me. The force of the blow sent me reeling. I tasted copper in my mouth. Something inside me snapped. I didn't care if I died anymore. I lunged at her, my teeth baring. I didn't have my wolf, but I had my rage. I tackled her off the platform, and we hit the floor hard. You bitch! Sienna shrieked. I started punching, hitting anything I could reach. I grabbed her silver dress and ripped it, my nails scratching deep into her neck. She screamed, clawing at my eyes. The crowd was roaring now, circling us like a cage match. Kill her, Sienna, someone shouted. Sienna shifted her weight and kicked me off. She was a trained warrior, I was a girl who had lost everything. She stood up, her face red with fury, and shifted her hand into a claw. She swung at my throat, but a hand caught her wrist in midair. It was Cade. He had moved so fast the air behind him whistled. Enough, Cade growled. The power in his voice made everyone in the room drop to their knees. The pressure of his alpha aura was so heavy I could barely breathe. She attacked me. Sienna cried, trying to look small and innocent. She's a wild animal. Cade didn't look at her. He looked at me. I was on the floor, bleeding, my hair a mess, but I was staring back at him with pure hate. She is a wild animal, Cade said, his voice low. And that is why the auction is over. No one here is strong enough to keep her. Except for me. The room went silent. The disappointment was thick, but no one dared to argue with the alpha. Cade, you can't be serious, Sienna hissed. You promised me I would be your Luna. You can't keep this thing in the palace. Cade stepped closer to me. He reached down and grabbed the back of my neck, his fingers hot against my skin. I do what I want, Sienna. And right now, I want to see how long it takes to break a northern Luna. He hauled me up and turned to the crowd. The feast continues. Drink. Eat. Tomorrow, we begin the integration of the new lands. Elara, you will serve the wine. If a single drop hits the floor, I will kill one of the North Valley survivors we took prisoner today. My heart stopped. Survivors? You have prisoners? I whispered, my voice trembling. Cade leaned into my ear, his breath hot. 30 of them, including the children. Their lives are in your hands now, Elara. Don't drop the bottle. He shoved a heavy crystal decanter into my hands. It was full of dark red wine. It was heavy, and my arms were already shaking from the fight. Serve, he commanded. For the next 4 hours, I was a ghost. I walked from table to table, pouring wine for the men who had murdered my family. They tripped me. They whispered disgusting things in my ear. One man purposely knocked my arm, trying to make me spill the wine. I caught the bottle just in time, my muscles screaming in agony. I saw the survivors in a corner of the hall, chained like dogs. My little cousin, Leo, was there. He was only 6. He was crying, his eyes wide with terror. I looked at him, and my heart broke into 1,000 pieces. I couldn't fail them. Finally, the feast began to wind down. The wolves were drunk and loud. Cade stood up and signaled to the guards. "Take the prisoners to the mines," he ordered. "Except for the girl. She comes with me." "No! Please!" I cried out, dropping the empty bottle. It shattered on the stone floor. The room went dead quiet. I looked at the shattered glass. Then I looked at Cade. His face was a mask of cold fury. "What did I tell you, Elara?" he asked, walking toward me. "It was an accident. Please, don't hurt them." I fell to my knees, surrounded by the broken glass. The shards cut into my skin, but I didn't care. It was me. Punish me. Cade stopped in front of me. He looked at the blood pooling around my knees from the glass. He didn't look happy. He looked disgusted. "You want to be punished?" he asked. He grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the center of the hall, where a large, wooden pillar stood. He took a pair of iron shackles hanging from the ceiling and snapped them around my wrists. He pulled the chain until I was stretched thin, my toes barely touching the ground. "Since you like the floor so much," Cade said to the room, "she will stay here all night. No food. No water. And if anyone touches her before I return, they will lose their hands." He turned to me, his eyes glowing gold in the dim light. "You think you're a hero, Elara? You're nothing. You're just a girl in a cage." He turned and walked out of the hall, Sienna following close behind him, laughing. One by one, the lights went out. The guards left. The prisoners were dragged away, their screams echoing in the distance. I was left alone in the dark, hanging from the ceiling, my blood dripping onto the cold stone. My knees stung, my wrists felt like they were being torn apart, and the silence of the hall was more terrifying than the noise. But then, I heard a sound. A soft footstep. I looked up. A shadow was moving toward me. "Who's there?" I rasped. The shadow stepped into a sliver of moonlight. It wasn't a guard. It was a young woman, her face covered in scars. She held a small piece of bread and a cup of water. "Drink quickly," she whispered. "If they catch me, we're both dead." "Why are you helping me?" I asked, gulping the water. "Because," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "You fought back. No one ever fights back against the black moon. You gave us hope, Luna." "I'm not a Luna anymore," I sobbed. "Yes, you are," she insisted. "And you have to survive. Because tomorrow, Tomorrow is the marking ceremony. The marking ceremony. My blood ran cold. If Cade marked me, he would have total control over my mind and body. I would be his forever. I won't let him, I whispered to the empty hall as the girl disappeared back into the shadows. I'll die before I let him mark me. But as the moon reached its peak, I felt a strange heat in my chest. A pull. A connection. I looked toward the stairs leading to Cade's chambers. My wolf was awake. And she wasn't angry. She was calling for him. The mate bond was waking up, and it was the most painful betrayal of all. The shackles snapped open with a violent metallic crack. I didn't fall, I collapsed. My legs gave out, and I slammed onto the cold stone floor, the glass shards from the night before digging deeper into my knees. Get up, a guard barked, kicking my ribs. I gasped, the pain lancing through my side. I grabbed his boot and twisted with every ounce of strength I had left. He went down, his head hitting the pillar with a hollow thud. I scrambled for his dagger, but a heavy hand crushed my wrist into the floor. I told you, she's a biter, a deep voice chuckled. I looked up. It wasn't Cade. It was his beta, Jax, a man with a jagged scar running down his throat. He hauled me up by my hair, dragging me toward the grand staircase. The Alpha is waiting, Jax sneered. It's time to pay the debt. I don't owe him anything. I spat, clawing at his hand. He didn't answer. He threw me through the massive double doors of the Alpha's private chambers. The room was huge, lit only by the flickering orange glow of a massive fireplace. The scent of cedar and rain hit me like a physical blow. My wolf began to howl inside my mind, a sound of recognition that made me want to scream. Cade was standing by the window, his back to me. He was shirtless, the muscles of his back rippling like coiled snakes. He turned slowly, his golden eyes glowing in the shadows. Leave us, Cade commanded. Jax bowed and backed out, slamming the doors. The lock clicked. We were alone. You look like a mess, Elara, Cade said, walking toward me. His presence felt like a physical weight, pushing the air out of my lungs. You did this, I hissed, backing away until my spine hit the cold stone wall. You killed my pack. You sold me like a dog. I saved you from the dogs, he countered, stopping inches from me. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. I tried to flinch away, but he gripped my chin, forcing me to look at him. Your father would have sold you to the highest bidder. At least here, you are with an Alpha. I'd rather be dead. Is that right? He leaned in, his nose brushing against my neck. I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through my body. It was disgusting. It was terrifying. It was the mate bond, and it was screaming that this monster belonged to me. Get away from me. I roared. I brought my knee up, aiming for his groin. He blocked it easily, pinning my leg against the wall with his thigh. I swung a punch at his face, but he caught my wrist, slamming it above my head. He pressed his entire body against mine, crushing me into the wall. Stop fighting it, Elara, he growled, his voice dropping into a dark, gravelly tone. Your wolf knows. You feel the pull. You've felt it since the moment I stepped into your village. No, I whispered, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. Never. Tonight, I mark you, Cade said, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin of my shoulder. Not because I love you. Not because I want a Luna. But because I need to keep you quiet. A marked mate cannot disobey her Alpha. I will bite my own tongue off before I take your mark. I thrashed against him, my nails digging into his shoulders, drawing blood. He didn't even flinch. The smell of his blood only made the mate bond roar louder. It was like a drug, clouding my mind, making my body betray my heart. He moved his mouth to the crook of my neck, right over the pulse point. I felt his canines lengthen. The marking was the most intimate, painful, and permanent thing a wolf could do. "Please," I begged, my voice breaking. "Hold still," he commanded. He bit down. A scream ripped from my throat. It wasn't just pain, it was like liquid fire being poured into my veins. I felt his soul crash into mine, a tidal wave of darkness, power, and ancient hunger. The world blurred. I saw flashes of his memories, wars, blood, a lonely childhood, the weight of a crown he never wanted. But then, something went wrong. The bond didn't settle. It exploded. A shockwave of energy blasted outward from us, shattering the glass windows of the bedroom and knocking the furniture over. Cade gasped, ripping his teeth away from my neck. He stumbled back, clutching his chest, his eyes wide with shock. What is this?" he gasped, his skin turning deathly pale. I slumped to the floor, clutching my neck. The mark was glowing a bright, angry silver instead of the usual dull red. "You're rejected." I laughed through the pain, coughing up blood. "The bond, it won't take." "Impossible," Cade growled. He tried to step toward me, but he collapsed to one knee, coughing violently. Blood splattered the floor. Suddenly, the doors burst open. Jax and 4 guards rushed in, weapons drawn. "Alpha!" We heard the explosion. Jax shouted. He stopped dead when he saw Cade on the floor. "She poisoned him." Sienna screamed, appearing in the doorway. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "Look at his chest." She used northern magic to kill him. I looked at Cade's chest. A black vine-like pattern was spreading from his heart, pulsing with a sick, purple light. "I didn't do anything," I shouted, backing toward the broken window. "Liar!" Sienna lunged at me, a silver dagger in her hand. I dodged, the blade whistling past my ear. I grabbed a heavy brass lamp from the floor and swung it, hitting her in the side of the head. She went down, but the guards were already on me. 2 of them grabbed my arms, slamming me face first into the floor. "Kill her," Jax ordered, his face twisted in rage. "She tried to assassinate the Alpha." "Wait." Cade's voice was weak, but it still held the command of a king. He struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on his desk. The black veins were still spreading, but he forced himself to stand straight. "Don't kill her," Cade panted. "If she dies, I die. The bond, it's locked." The room went silent. "What do you mean, locked?" Jax asked, his voice trembling. "The marking, it didn't just claim her," Cade whispered, looking at me with a mix of fear and hatred. "It tied our life forces together. We are balanced. If her heart stops, mine stops. If I bleed, she feels the pain." Sienna stood up, clutching her head. "Then lock her in the dungeon. Keep her alive, but make her suffer." "No," Cade growled, his eyes flashing gold one last time before he collapsed back into his chair. "Take her to the high tower. Guard her with your lives. If a single hair on her head is harmed, I will execute every guard on duty." The guards didn't hesitate. They dragged me out of the room, but this time, they didn't kick me. They held me like I was made of glass, not because they cared, but because their Alpha's life depended on my breathing. As they dragged me down the hallway, I looked back. Cade was watching me, his hand over his heart, his face a mask of agony. I had been sold, humiliated, and marked. But now, I had the one thing I never thought I'd get. I had his life in my hands. "I hope it hurts, Cade," I whispered into the dark. "I hope every breath you take feels like the fire you brought to my home." The cell door slammed shut, the heavy iron bolt sliding into place. I was a prisoner, but for the first time, I wasn't the only one in pain. The real war had just begun. A heavy iron tray slammed against my cell door, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I didn't jump. I was already at the window, picking at the mortar of the stones with a sharpened spoon I'd stolen from the morning guard. "Eat, northern witch," the guard growled through the slot. "Eat it yourself, dog," I snapped back. The door hissed open. It wasn't the guard. It was Cade. He looked terrible. His usual bronze skin was gray, and he was sweating through his black silk shirt. He leaned against the doorframe, his hand clutching his side. Every breath he took sounded like a saw cutting through wood. "The bond, it's pulling," Cade rasped, his eyes bloodshot. "I can feel your hunger. It's making me weak." "Good," I said, standing up and dropping the spoon. "I hope you starve. I hope you shrivel up and turn to dust." He lunged. Even weakened, he was faster than any human. He pinned me against the cold stone wall, but his grip was shaking. For the first time, I didn't feel just terror. I felt his heart, it was skipping beats, fluttering like a dying bird. "You, help me," he wheezed. "Why would I help the man who burned my world?" I spat. Suddenly, the tower shook. A massive explosion rocked the fortress. Dust fell from the ceiling, blinding me for a second. Screams erupted from the courtyard below. "The Silver Hunters," Cade cursed, falling to his knees. "They found the scent." The Silver Hunters were a rogue group of humans and outcasts who used poisoned weapons to exterminate wolf packs. If they were here, they weren't here to talk. They were here for a massacre. "Cade. They're in the north wing." Jax's voice screamed from the hallway. Cade tried to shift, but his bones groaned and snapped back into place. He couldn't transform. The mark, the silver light at my neck, was pulsing in sync with the black veins on his chest. My rejection was paralyzing his wolf. The door to my cell was kicked off its hinges. 2 men in tactical gear, wearing gas masks, stormed in. They weren't holding guns. They held crossbows loaded with shimmering, jagged bolts. "Alpha Cade," one of them muffled through his mask. "The bounty on your head just doubled." They fired. "No!" I screamed. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe it was the bond, or maybe I just wanted to be the one to kill him myself. I tackled Cade, sending us both rolling across the floor as 2 silver bolts hissed into the wall where his head had been a second ago. Cade groaned, his skin blistering where the air from the silver bolts touched him. "Get up!" I yelled, grabbing his arm. I hauled him toward the secret passage behind the tapestry, a detail I'd noticed the guards mentioning. I grabbed the heavy iron fire poker from the hearth. As the first hunter lunged with a silver combat knife, I swung. The metal caught him in the temple, and he went down hard. I didn't stop. I grabbed his knife. It burned my hand. I was a wolf, too, but I wrapped my shirt around the hilt and stabbed it into the second hunter's leg. "Run!" I barked at Cade. We scrambled down the narrow, dark spiral staircase. Cade was heavy, leaning his entire weight on me. We reached a small hidden chamber halfway down. He collapsed against a crate, gasping. In my pocket, he wheezed, pointing to his trousers. "The vial." I reached in and pulled out a small glass tube filled with a glowing blue liquid. "What is this?" "Wolfsbane, diluted," he panted. "It slows the heart. It stops the poison from reaching my brain. But I can't open it. My hands." His fingers were black, the veins bulging. He was dying right in front of me. This was it. I could let him die. If he died, I might die too, but at least the world would be rid of him. I looked at the vial. Then I looked at the mark on my neck in a small mirror on the wall. It was glowing. My life was tied to his. "You owe me your soul for this," I hissed. I popped the cork with my teeth and poured the liquid into his mouth. He gagged, his body jerking as the medicine hit his system. He let out a roar of pure agony, his claws digging into the stone floor, carving deep grooves into the rock. "More," he gasped. "That's all of it." The door above us smashed open. The hunters were coming. "Elara," Cade said, his voice suddenly steady, though his eyes were still golden with pain. "The silver, it's not just the hunters. My father, he left a trap. A silver spike in the foundation of this fortress. It's been draining me for years. That's why I needed your blood. The North blood is the only thing that can neutralize it." "You used me as a filter?" I shouted, my blood boiling. "You didn't just mark me for power, you marked me to be your medicine?" "I marked you to survive," he roared back, standing up. He was still shaky, but the black veins were receding. He grabbed me by the waist and pulled me close. The heat was back. The erotic, dangerous pull of the bond hit me like a physical wave. He smelled like ozone and wood smoke. "Help me reach the basement," he whispered, his lips brushing my ear. "We break the spike, or we both burn in this tower." "I'm only doing this so I can be the one to end you," I lied. My heart was racing, and for a split second, I wanted him to kiss me. I hated myself for it. He laughed, a dark, dry sound. "That's the spirit." The door to our hiding spot exploded into splinters. 3 hunters charged in, throwing silver-coated nets. Cade didn't shift into a wolf, he couldn't. Instead, he moved like a demon in human skin. He grabbed the first hunter's neck and snapped it with one hand. I dove low, sweeping the legs of the second one and burying my stolen knife into his chest. Blood sprayed across my face. I didn't blink. I felt alive. The adrenaline was a drug. Cade grabbed a fallen crossbow and fired 3 bolts in rapid succession, pinning the last hunter to the wall. The basement. Now! We sprinted through the burning hallways. The fortress was a war zone. I saw Sienna in the distance, barking orders to guards, but she wasn't helping Cade. She was moving toward the treasury. She was abandoning him. "Your Luna is leaving you," I shouted over the roar of the fire. Cade didn't even look. She was never my Luna. She was a political mistake. We reached the heavy steel door of the basement. It was locked from the inside. "Break it!" I yelled. Cade slammed his shoulder into the door. Nothing. He did it again, his bone popping loudly. On the 3rd hit, the hinges groaned and gave way. Inside the room, a massive silver pillar was glowing with a sickly light. It was carved with runes of hate. The air in the room felt like acid. I felt my skin beginning to peel just being near it. "We have to touch it together," Cade said, reaching out a trembling hand. "The North and the Black Moon. Together, we can shatter the silver. It will burn us. It's better than being a slave to it." He grabbed my hand. His palm was searing hot. We stepped toward the pillar. The silver hummed, a high-pitched scream that made my ears bleed. On 3, Cade groaned, his eyes turning back to gold. 1, 2, 3. We slammed our joined hands onto the silver. The world turned white. A scream ripped from my lungs, joined by Cade's deep roar. The pain was beyond anything I had ever felt. It felt like my blood was boiling, like my bones were turning into glass and shattering. The silver pillar cracked. A spiderweb of black lines raced through the metal. Boom! The pillar exploded into a million tiny fragments. The shockwave threw us across the room. I hit the wall and everything went black. I woke up minutes later. The room was silent. The air was clear. I looked over. Cade was lying in the middle of the room. He wasn't moving. The black veins were gone. His chest was still. Cade? I whispered, crawling toward him. Cade, wake up. I reached him and pressed my ear to his chest. Nothing. No, I sobbed, shaking him. You don't get to die yet. You still have to pay for what you did. I felt a sharp pain in my own chest. My heart slowed down. The bond was pulling me into the darkness with him. Please, I whispered, pressing my forehead against his. His eyes snapped open. They weren't gold anymore. They were a deep, piercing blue. He grabbed my hair and pulled me into a kiss that tasted like iron and honey. It was violent, desperate, and filled with a hunger that terrified me. He pulled back, his breath ragged. I'm alive, he whispered. I hate you, I breathed against his lips. I know, he smirked. But as we sat there in the wreckage, I saw something in the shadows. Sienna was standing in the doorway, holding a crossbow leveled at my heart. If you won't die, she hissed, then you will. And he'll follow you to the grave. Thwip. The bolt flew. The silver bolt hissed through the air, aimed straight for my throat. I didn't have time to blink. Cade roared, his body moving like a blur of dark shadow as he threw himself in front of me. The bolt slammed into his shoulder, the impact spinning him around. He groaned, a sound of pure agony, as the silver-tipped metal sizzled against his skin. Cade! I screamed, catching him before he hit the stone floor. Sienna stood in the doorway of the basement, her eyes wide with a manic, flickering light. She was reloading the crossbow with shaking hands. Her beautiful silver dress was torn and stained with soot. She looked like a fallen angel turned into a demon. You should have died in the explosion, you northern brat. Sienna shrieked. He was mine. I spent years poisoning his mind, years making him think he needed me. And then you show up with your pure blood and ruin everything. Cade reached for the bolt in his shoulder, his teeth bared in a snarl. Sienna, stop. No, she yelled, leveling the weapon again. If I can't be the Luna of the Black Moon, no one will. I'll kill her, and then I'll watch the bond rip the life out of you, Cade. We'll die together, just like I always planned. I didn't wait for her to fire. I grabbed a jagged chunk of the shattered silver pillar from the floor. It burned my palm, but I didn't care. I hurled it at her with every bit of strength I had. The heavy shard caught the crossbow just as she pulled the trigger. Clack! The bolt went wide, burying itself in a wooden crate behind me. Sienna screamed in frustration and dropped the broken weapon. She didn't run. She shifted. Her bones snapped and elongated. Her skin sprouted gray, coarse fur. In seconds, a massive gray she-wolf stood where the woman had been. She lunged, her yellow teeth snapping inches from my face. I rolled to the left, narrowly avoiding her claws. I didn't have my wolf yet. The trauma of the massacre had locked my spirit away, but I had the instincts of a survivor. I grabbed a heavy iron chain hanging from the wall and swung it like a whip. The metal caught Sienna across the snout. She yelped, a high-pitched sound of pain, and retreated into the shadows of the basement. "Cade, get up!" I shouted, glancing back at him. He was trying. He had ripped the bolt out, but the silver poison was already turning his blood black again. He was leaning against a stone pillar, his eyes flickering between blue and gold. "The guards," he panted. "Sienna, she's not alone." As if on cue, 4 of Sienna's personal loyalists burst into the room. These weren't regular pack members, they were her brothers, high-ranking warriors who wanted Cade gone so they could take over the Black Moon. "Kill the girl," the lead warrior ordered, shifting his arm into a massive, clawed weapon. "Protect the sister." I backed up against the wall, the iron chain wrapped around my fist. I was surrounded. I looked at the silver shards on the floor. I looked at the dying Alpha. And then, I looked at the men who wanted to finish what my father started. Something inside me broke. The cage around my heart shattered. A low, guttural growl vibrated in my chest. It wasn't my voice. It was hers. My wolf. She was back, and she was furious. "My turn," I whispered. I didn't shift fully, I didn't have the time, but my claws erupted from my fingertips, and my vision turned sharp and red. I lunged at the first warrior. He swung a heavy fist, but I ducked under it and buried my claws in his stomach. I didn't stop to watch him fall. I spun around, swinging the iron chain with my other hand, catching the second man in the throat. Sienna, in her wolf form, leaped from the shadows, pinning me to the ground. Her weight was immense. Her hot, stinking breath was in my face as she tried to sink her teeth into my neck. "You are nothing," I wheezed, pushing against her furry chest. I felt a surge of heat from the mark on my neck. The silver light flared, blindingly bright. It wasn't just a mark anymore, it was a weapon. The power of the bond surged through me, fueled by Cade's proximity. I felt his strength, his rage, his hunger. I slammed my forehead into Sienna's nose. While she was dazed, I reached up and grabbed her ears, twisting with everything I had. She howled and rolled off me. I scrambled up, but the other 2 warriors were on me. One grabbed my hair, yanking my head back, while the other raised a silver dagger. "Die, bitch." Crunch. A massive black hand wrapped around the warrior's head. Cade was standing, his eyes glowing like twin suns. He didn't look sick anymore. He looked like the god of war. He squeezed, and the warrior's skull gave way like an eggshell. The other warrior let go of my hair and tried to run, but Cade was faster. He grabbed the man by the waist and literally tore him in half, throwing the pieces across the room. The basement was a bloodbath. Sienna shifted back into her human form, huddled in the corner. She was naked, shivering, and bleeding from her nose. She looked at Cade, her eyes filling with fake tears. "Cade, please, they forced me," she sobbed, reaching out a hand. "I love you. I did it for us. She was poisoning you, I was trying to save you." Cade walked toward her, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He didn't look like he believed a word. "You tried to kill my mate," Cade said, his voice so low it made the stones vibrate. "She's not your mate. She's a prisoner. Sienna screamed, her face twisting again. She is the Luna of this pack, Cade countered. He stood over her, his shadow swallowing her whole. And you are a traitor. Cade reached down and grabbed Sienna by the throat, lifting her off the floor just like he had done to me on that first night. But there was no mercy in his eyes this time. Cade, wait. I shouted. He paused, looking back at me. She needs to die, Elara. She will never stop. I know, I said, walking toward them. I wiped the blood from my forehead. But don't do it for the pack. Don't do it for the law. I took the silver dagger from the floor, the one the warrior had dropped. I walked up to Sienna, who was gasping for air, her face turning purple. This is for the Northern Valley, I whispered. I didn't hesitate. I drove the silver blade into Sienna's shoulder, not enough to kill her instantly, but enough to make her feel the fire. She screamed, a sound that echoed through the entire fortress. Take her to the dungeon, I told Cade, my voice cold. Let the pack see what happens to traitors. Let them watch her fade. Cade looked at me with a newfound respect. A dark, twisted sort of pride flashed in his eyes. He dropped Sienna, and she slumped to the floor, sobbing and clutching her wound. Guards! Cade roared. The doors burst open, and this time it was his loyal soldiers. They saw the bodies, they saw the blood, and they saw me standing next to their Alpha, holding a silver blade. Take her, Cade ordered, pointing at Sienna. And clear the hall. We have a pack to lead. The guards dragged Sienna away. Her screams faded as they took her deeper into the bowels of the fortress. I turned to Cade. The adrenaline was starting to fade, and the pain was rushing back in. My knees felt weak. Cade reached out, catching me by the waist. You fought well, little wolf, he murmured. I didn't do it for you, I said, though my body was leaning into his heat. It doesn't matter why, he said. He leaned down, his lips ghosting over mine. The pack saw you. They saw your power. They know who their Luna is now. Suddenly, the ground shook again. Not an explosion this time, a horn. A deep, haunting sound that came from the woods. What is that? I asked, my heart hammering. Cade's face went pale. The council. They've heard about the massacre. They're here to judge me for taking a northern mate without permission. And if they don't like what they see? Cade gripped my hand, his fingers locking with mine. Then we fight them, too. I looked at our joined hands. We were covered in blood, surrounded by death, and tied together by a bond one still hated. But as the council's army appeared on the horizon, I knew one thing for sure. The comment section of my life was about to get a lot more crowded. And I wasn't going down without a fight. Let them come, I said, baring my teeth. Cade smiled, a wicked, dangerous thing. That's my Luna.